Recently, we got another Ubisoft forward, and for the first time ever, an Assassin's Creed showcase. The sole purpose to show the future of Assassin's Creed and the many projects that they have in development. I'm someone that's been really jaded and skeptical with Assassin's Creed. I loved the first few games so much that as good as games like Origins and all the others can be, I just feel they are so disconnected from what made this franchise truly great and special in the early games. In my Assassin's Creed Ranked video, I said that I looked to Valhalla as a culmination of the series titles, as it wrapped up so many lingering storylines, and I just wasn't interested in the future at Infinity as it was leaked back then. This is before we learned more. Projects like Mirage and what Infinity actually is doesn't seem quite as dire as I originally thought and as the leak presented. I've also come to a realization that this franchise will never have the same impact that it did back then. It was new, exciting, and it did something not seen done before. But just because this franchise won't be the same doesn't mean it can't still have great projects, as I still do consider games like Black Flag and Origins great games, separate from what made the original series so special. The first thing we got to look at was Mirage, with a brand new cinematic reveal trailer, a callback to the days of old, both in its presentation and what the trailer actually showed. So much old assassin iconography here. The white hooded robes, the blade in the crowd, the bustling cities, the parkour, so much of this trailer was so reminiscent of what old fans like myself love about the series. As well as that, it also showed us the attention to this series that it has. The ring finger sacrifice being such an instrumental moment. The parkour showed between Basim but also Roshan, and the different levels of stealth seen within the trailer. Other aspects like getting rid of the bow and bringing back throwing knives, so much more discreet in a public setting. And the homage to the Assassin's Creed 2 trailer of Basim recreating the same move Ezio did. We also got some important story outlines, like Basim being a thief and brought into the Brotherhood, as well as a mask singling the Order of Ancients will also be in this game, as well as the hidden ones. The thing that I'm probably most excited for is learning about Basim. While we saw Basim in Valhalla, he was pretty much completely overtaken by Loki in that. In here we get to see Basim before Loki's entrance, and also probably a bit during. I still feel like this game, as the title suggests, could be a Mirage. Marketing solely to the older fans, yet still not having the same level of true parkour, stealth, and assassination mechanics that the older games did, and feeling quite shallow in that regard. It's going to be hard to tell until we see actual gameplay or even lay our hands on the game itself, but so far the trailer is pointing in the right direction. There's also some reassuring details we learn outside of the trailer, such as the fact that this was originally leaked as a Valhalla DLC that was separated, whereas they've now clarified that that was only ever an idea on paper and not much design work actually ever went into that, which makes it feel more separate as a full-length game than rather just a Valhalla spin-off. We also heard things about the notoriety system returning, which I am stoked about, as well as they talked a lot about taking inspiration from Assassin's Creed 1, which is so evident throughout the trailer, but also the Ezio games. They also stated that parkour was based on Unity, which is significantly better than the recent games, but I still felt like Unity didn't give as much player control as the older games, and I hope they try to find a good balance between the style and look of Unity and the feel and control of the older games. They also said black box missions and assassinations were returning, and they were all around building bureaus within Baghdad, which I'm incredibly happy about. Baghdad seems interesting to explore. I'm not super familiar with the history of this time, but the bustling cities and learning about new culture I cannot wait for. We also saw a castle, Alamut, which is a real castle that was actually used by the assassins in real life, which is a great homage to Masyaf, but also bringing in real world history. This is also a new team making this game in Bordeaux. They seem super passionate and eager to prove themselves, and really I'm all about an underdog story, so I'm really hoping this game succeeds for them. Ultimately, I think this trailer got me excited. Simply seeing an assassin on the cover is just enough to get me a little bit giddy, but ultimately I've learned that with Ubisoft, you still need to remain skeptical and see more. And as always, we haven't actually seen any gameplay yet, so that's probably the most important thing to wait for. We got to look at a new DLC for Valhalla called The Last Chapter. What surprised me was that this DLC was free, and that also was a conclusion to the game. I still haven't played Dawn of Ragnarok, so I probably should before I get to this, but ultimately I want to see how this finishes, because the ending of the game didn't feel all that much like an ending. I'm keen to see characters like Alfred, Eivor, Sigurd, and all the rest again, and see how Eivor eventually dies in North America. We got some information on the Netflix show, which by information, I mean reconfirmation that it's happening. After the movie, I'm very, very worried about this. And honestly, whatever settings and stories they're going to tell, I would rather have full-length games. I'm still interested though, as it has potential, and I will be watching depending on how the trailers look. We're into the codename portion of these reveals, and the first up is Jade. And this one annoyed me the absolute most out of any of them, because for a long time, I have wanted Assassin's Creed to go to East and Southeast Asia, and one setting I've wanted above all else, and that's China. And the fact that we're getting this finally, but it's a mobile game, is annoying the hell out of me, because I do not like playing mobile games. My last hope for this is that it eventually gets Revelation, which if you don't know, Revelation originally started as I'm pretty sure a PSP game was then built into a full-length game, which I hope happens to this game, but I highly doubt. Another thing annoyed me about this game too though, is that this game is set before Origins and even before Odyssey, yet has assassin iconography as an assassin in white robe and a hidden blade there, which just, in the context and narrative of Assassin's Creed, shouldn't work. They're probably doing some proto-assassin thing like they did with Odyssey and Darius, but it still doesn't make much sense. Still, this looks very impressive for a mobile game, and this is the most gameplay we saw out of the whole show, so that's something. On to Project Red, and as long time requested, Assassin's Creed is finally going to feudal Japan. That's really all the trailer gave us. It's nice to see assassin robes and a hidden blade again, as well as they're very much going into the more shinobi ninja style than samurai, which makes more sense for Assassin's Creed. This is the same team that made Syndicate and particularly Odyssey, and they've described this as the RPG Assassin's Creed. Because of the team that does it, and because of the RPG nature of this game, I'm significantly less interested in this announcement than a lot of the other ones. I feel very satiated by Ghost of Tsushima in terms of a Japanese Assassin's Creed-like game. I know there's a lot of comparisons between the two, and Ghost of Tsushima isn't exactly a copy, but it takes a lot of inspiration from those earlier games in the more stealth segments, and I really appreciated that. Still, I very much hope this game can win me over, as Japan is a great setting that has rightfully been requested for such a long time. I just don't care for how Quebec have made their games traditionally. I'm not a fan of the spongy combat, the endless amounts of grind, and the somewhat comedic and just generally less serious nature of their storytelling. Next up was codename Hexe, which all we really got was a logo and some runes around it, which basically tells us that this will be about witch trials in the Holy Roman Empire and likely to take place in northern Germany. I think the location is fantastic, as the Holy Roman Empire definitely deserves some spotlight. As well as that, the whole fact of dealing with witch trials is incredibly interesting, and especially with how they can potentially tie that back to the Isu, makes me very curious about what they eventually plan to do with this game. What excites me about this game is the fact that it is described as a different type of Assassin's Creed experience. Well, that does excite me and both worry me. Though, my trust is in that the core Montreal team is making this, and particularly Darby is involved in the narrative. There's not too much to go off based on the logo, but this is probably the most intriguing out of all the announcements that were here today. Lastly, it's not a game, but we learn a bit more about Project Infinity, which now we know is only a code name, and thus I'm betting the final name will be called Animus. This is going to act more like a hub, and Red is the first project, and Hexe is also a part of it. When Infinity was initially leaked and then announced, I thought of something more akin to the live service experiences that we know. Some multiplayer focus with different seasonal content and battle passes constantly, just wishing you to spend more money. Seasonal Assassin's Creed experiences was not something I was interested in. They would dramatically reduce the importance of these games and the stories that they could tell. This has reassured me a bit, as we learn that the games are going to be full-length games with their own unique identities within them. It very much excites me we can have the RPG game with Red, something different with Hexe, and a more traditional focus with Mirage. So we'll see how that plays out and whether they want to satiate all different fans that this fanbase has gathered over the years. We did get confirmation that multiplayer is being developed for, which, I mean, I expected, and we'll just have to see if it's any good, I guess. The announcement that worried me the most was that they said modern day was going to be in Infinity, and not in these projects such as Red and Hexe. Which, separating it for fans that don't want it, I can understand, as it's been long criticised by casuals to be their least favourite part of the games. But separating it from the actual storylines that these games telling just makes me feel like the modern day will be antiquated and not important, which if you're going to do that, why do you need to have it at all? I do love the modern day, but I love when it tells an actual story and links these franchises together. And if it's not going to do that well, what's the point of doing it at all? I think of other sort of hubs and connections that franchises have tried to make. I remember specifically with Call of Duty Elite and how that lasted 1, maybe 2 games at most, and also Battlefield Premium. And these sort of subscriptions and rolling hubs between these different experiences never really seem to take off because all they do is delay you getting into the actual experience that you want, the game. So Infinity is going to need something that will actually draw players to it to actually play and experience things. They seem to be tackling this in 2 directions. From casuals, they want the multiplayer, and hopefully that can take off in some way and create a social experience within Assassin's Creed. And for older fans like myself, they think they're trying to get us in with the modern day because they know we're going to care about it. Overall, Infinity doesn't sound too bad as I originally thought, and while I don't think it's going to work all that much, as I don't think a hub will really be all that interesting, it'll be intriguing to see what they eventually do with it, and if it will fail or ultimately succeed. With all of these announcements, you have to keep in mind that it's Ubisoft, so there's a lot of reservations. Between bloated games that just constantly want you to spend money on microtransactions, the abuse within their company's walls, and the sincere lack of innovation, and games felt like they're built by marketing departments. As well as that, what they've turned Assassin's Creed into is just really not what I fell in love with. And I have to just make peace with the fact that these games are no longer a series. They're not held together by intrinsic narrative and purpose. They're a franchise, they're an IP that has undergone Disneyfication, building out roadmaps, spin-off, and endless sequels. Still, that doesn't mean the games themselves can't be individually good, and I'm looking forward to it on that aspect. Ultimately though, these projects look good. I'm glad that they're satiating all different fans of this franchise, something like Mirage for players like myself, as well as whatever this codename Hexe may be, as well as Red for all the fans that really enjoyed Odyssey and Valhalla. Ultimately, I can't really say I'm excited, but I definitely am intrigued by all the announcements that we hear today. The show was definitely lacking on gameplay, which was an issue, but I feel like they kind of sort of made up for it with announcements. I think in some part I'll always care Assassin's Creed, even if I don't always love Assassin's Creed. Thank you so much for watching. I've been a big fan of Assassin's Creed and it's been a big part of my life. I just thought I should get my thoughts out there and what I thought about this showcase and the future of the franchise in general. It's not as bad as I thought, but it's also not really the return to form that I was hoping. But in saying that, there is some good stuff here and I'm excited to see more. If you like this video, please leave a like and comment what your thoughts were on this showcase and Assassin's Creed future in general. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And until then, cheers and have a good one.